In this spirit, today we gather to celebrate Dia de los Muertos and to honor the life and legacy of Cindy Montañez. El Dia de los Muertos is a sacred time to remember our dearly departed, to reflect on the lessons they imparted, and celebrate their lasting contributions to our world. Today, we honor Cindy Montañez, a fierce warrior in the fight for environmental justice, ethnic studies, and social justice more broadly. Cindy's connection to UCLA was profound. She attended this university in the 1990s and was a passionate student leader. She fought to maintain funding for the Chicano Studies Research Center that I direct now, so I'm deeply indebted to her. She also participated in a 14-day hunger strike that ultimately led to the establishment of what we know as the Cesar Y. Chavez Department of Chicano and Chicana and Central American Studies. Cindy's impact was deeply felt on our campus and throughout our community. The thousands of students that have been educated by our department have been transformed and have developed the type of commitment to the community and to society that Cindy left behind. Her spirit lives on in our students. She was a trailblazer in every sense. She broke barriers not only as a college student, but at age 25, she became the youngest person ever elected to the City Council in San Fernando. By age 28, she became the youngest woman elected to the California State Legislature. And at age 30, she chaired the Assembly Rules Committee, where she was both the youngest person and the first Latina to hold the post. In her so many roles, Cindy championed environmental and climate justice. As an elected leader and later executive director of Tree People, she dedicated her life to advancing environmental justice and climate justice, with the focus on communities disproportionately affected by pollution and poor air quality and poor water quality. Cindy was a strategic advocate, consistently pushing for sustainable infrastructure and equitable access to green spaces, efforts that have had a lasting impact on Los Angeles and beyond. As we honor Cindy Montañez, I hope we all draw inspiration for her life's work. I want us to develop a similar commitment to fighting for what is right. I want us to continue to protect our environment and advance social justice causes here in California and beyond. I want to call her into this room and into our lives, because we need, I know I'm going to steal your line, but we need to think about what Cindy would do as we face difficult decisions regarding our care for the planet and our care for each other. And so today, we bring together some speakers who are living in her legacy, who are continuing to advocate and educate people about sustainability, about environmental justice and climate justice. And I hope we all learn, I know that we're all gonna learn a lot today, and this will help us continue her legacy. I'm now gonna introduce our wonderful moderator for this event, Professor Veronica Herrera. My tocaya is also a faculty member in one of my departments, urban planning, and she also holds an appointment in political science. As an expert in the politics of development and environmental governance in cities, she's an ideal moderator for this event, so I'm gonna ask you to come up. I also want to note that she is an affiliate of the Institute of Environmental Sustainability, and this institute is a co-sponsor of today's panel. Cindy Montañez was on the board of advisors of the Institute of Environmental Sustainability before her untimely death. So please join me in welcoming Veronica Enriquez.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It's wonderful to be here with all of you today. Yes, I did not have the privilege of knowing Cindy, and I have been so inspired as I've learned more about her. I teach and write about environmental justice movements in Latin America, in Latin American cities, and I've been doing a lot of work for many years on sort of international environmental justice issues, river remediation, flooding, pollution exposure, all types of things like that. In Lima, Bogota, Buenos Aires, different Mexican cities. And I have more recently become more involved in thinking about environmental issues in California. A year ago, I had the privilege of being invited to be on the board of directors of LA Waterkeepers. And as I've learned more about LA water justice, I've been hearing so much about Cindy and her many actions, working on Measure W and other many fights, a lot of work behind the scenes to really live out a lot of the kind of stuff that I teach about, but maybe sometimes what's missing is really centering the voice of the people that are actually living the struggle and not just keeping in the classroom for our students. So I love the opportunity to be here with all of you today to hear more, more from people who knew her and others who are continuing to teach and mentor and do the work that symbolizes a lot of the advocacy priorities that Cindy had. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. And that is Dr. Michael Mendez, who is an assistant professor of environmental policy and planning at the University of California, Irvine, and visiting scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. Through, and not a small thing, a National Science Foundation Early Faculty Career Award, so that is very exciting. He previously was a Pinchot Faculty Fellow at the Yale School of the Environment. I want to celebrate his first book, Climate Change from the Streets, published through Yale University Press, which won the Harold and Margaret Sprout Award from the International Studies Association and the Association for Humanist Sociology's Betty and Alfred McClung Lee Award. As if that wasn't enough, in 2022, he became a Carnegie Fellow. So please welcome Dr. Mendez.
Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here today. An honor to be speaking about the memory of Cindy Montañez, who was a close friend, advocate, and mentor of mine. I've known her for almost 25 years or more, maybe a little bit more. When she first became a mayor of San Fernando, I grew up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and eventually would go on to work with her for many years in Sacramento. Then, as I transitioned to become an advocate, worked with her in her various capacities, including as an environmental leader back here in Los Angeles for Tree People. And because of all this diverse work that she has had a great impact in the environmental field in Los Angeles, throughout California, and nationally. And as we see from this photo right here, right before she passed away, was a dedication in the city of San Fernando of the Cindy Montañez Nature Park, which was essentially a pollinator garden. And if you look at the painting that's been commissioned by Cindy in the back, you see the little butterflies. And one of her last quotes was to carry her legacy and think about her, to think about these monarch butterflies that she's trying to help preserve. And she really saw these butterflies as a symbolism of the Latino struggle, particularly Latino migrants traveling to the United States and their struggle here and migrating for better sanctuary and better life. And it's quite important to see this park named after her, because growing up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, you would see names of streets, of parks and buildings named after white men and usually with a problematic racial history. So it's wonderful to see Cindy's name there and being part of the history going forward. Cindy's legacy is particularly important because in the realm of climate change policies, issues of environmental justice, which she championed very strongly, are often treated as second-order affairs compared to overarching sustainability goals. However, research has shown that having that strong environmental justice focus is the key to success in addressing local and global climate change challenges. Indeed, centering environmental justice, like Cindy would promote, amplifies the voices of the diverse constituencies most impacted by climate change and that are needed to build successful coalitions that shape and advance climate change policy. We often take for granted California's position on the global climate change space as inherent to our culture and our politics. However, it's not. Its origin comes from Latino legislators like Cindy that often work behind the scenes, really disrupting the older mainstream environmental groups, powerful interests, to squarely focus on the needs of Latino communities, particularly putting that public health focus on and the harm that climate change is having to our local communities. But in the nearly 20 years since the passage of California's landmark climate change justice bills and laws, people often forget and assume that what was passed in Washington, D.C. under President Biden that we now see has any connection to the history in California and Latino communities, and Cindy was a key part of that. For example, in recent years, to address the climate change emergency, activists and policymakers have proposed the Green New Deal at the federal level. Many of you may know of this as a radical proposal to decarbonize our economy and address poverty and inequality. However, for the last 2 decades, low-income communities of color have also pushed state and local governments to experiment with reducing greenhouse gas emissions and approaches that also address inequality and public health. These efforts in climate experimentation have been contentious and often met with significant resistance, and Cindy was square in the middle of that in Sacramento. While I'm supportive of the Green New Deal, I'm here to say that there's nothing new about the Green New Deal. Climate change experiments in places like California, through Cindy's work, has been all-out street fights. Environmental justice activists are often pitted against traditional environmentalists, business groups who favor the least costly mitigation solutions, which do not necessarily maximize equity and public health outcomes in low-income communities of color. To emphasize this, I just want to read a quick quote that Cindy did for my book that really sets the stage of this sort of battle for California's global dominance on climate change. In April 2006, I was working as a senior consultant for the youngest woman ever to serve in the California State Legislature. Elected in 2002, Cindy Montañez quickly became a rising star at the Capitol. Over the years, she championed key legislative initiatives to clean up contaminated sites and improve air quality in the state's most disadvantaged communities. When nationally based environmental groups announced their intention to push for far-reaching climate change legislation, she took particular interest and asked me to meet with her. As I entered her office, she was seated at a large mahogany desk. Behind her were photos from her time at the University of California, Los Angeles, where in 1993, she led a 14-day hunger strike to protest the decision by the chancellor against the creation of the Chicano Studies program. The hunger strike ultimately succeeded. The university relented and established the Cesar E. Chavez Center for Chicano Studies. When I sat down, Montañez began to describe her frustration with traditional environmentalists, whose global climate change solutions often ignored environmental inequities in communities of color. Her comments went straight to the heart of the matter. Quote, "These environmental groups have a hard time understanding our communities because they haven't spent much time working here. So when they speak about environmental protection, they focus on global, faraway issues. But I don't see how a climate change strategy that is disconnected from local communities at the front lines of impacts is going to achieve anything real," end quote. So this tension between these global ideas of climate change and local community impact is what Cindy really championed and helped lead with Speaker Fabiana Nunez at the time to withhold votes on key environmental bills. So essentially the Latino caucus led by Cindy and Nunez would essentially strategize and defeat mainstream environmental bills that dealt with the oceans, dealt with animal welfare, animal protection, that did not squarely put in Latino communities. So that is really a strong part of her legacy. And I also want to just really highlight that Cindy's quote reveals how these conflicts over climate change are cultural at their core. They illustrate that although the science of climate change is clear, policy decisions about how to respond to its effects remain contentious. Even when such decisions claim to be guided by objective knowledge, they are made and implemented through political institutions and all the competing interests and power and racial struggles that this implies. So again, this really focuses on the need to center people of color and not be afraid. And that's one of the things I learned mostly from Cindy, is to fight for individuals that don't have a voice. And I just want to end with a couple more thoughts. This was Cindy when I was teaching at the Yale School of Environment. She was so excited that I got a fellowship. Somebody from the San Fernando Valley was teaching at one of the premier environmental schools. That's her lecturing there. I just remember her big smile there. She was executive director of Tree People at the time. Here's another picture of her at COP26. So this was out in Scotland. And she took some of her staff there, and I was actually there with her and had an amazing time talking with her. And then this is just another photo of us working on some legislation, particularly legislation on landfills and recycling. At the time, the San Fernando Valley, the Northeast San Fernando Valley, had some of the most amount of open and closed landfills, and represented a major environmental justice issue. And then kind of going back to what Veronica was talking about, what would Cindy do? In my own research, I have pivoted a little bit from looking at climate change at a large state and local, and looking at the direct impacts that are happening to some of the most marginalized and stigmatized populations, such as Latino and indigenous migrants that are undocumented, and also LGBTQ populations of color that are disproportionately impacted by disaster. LGBTQ households, particularly people of color that are LGBTQ, our research has shown that those households experience displacement from climate-induced disasters, hurricanes, wildfires, extreme storms, 2 times the rate of heterosexual families. And I bring this up because I have been very forward-thinking, and not forward-thinking, but very out front with the media, with policymakers, both at the federal and state level. And it's really put a target on our back and sort of the research. If you see this tweet here from Elon Musk, this just happened maybe less than 2 weeks ago. He tweeted about a policy engagement we had with FEMA on LGBTQ people, and basically saying that during Hurricane Helene, that FEMA was not focused on LGBTQ populations. They were only focused on them and not everyone else. And so you can imagine how this created an uproar. And it was quite scary at the time. As you can see, over 30 million people saw that tweet. And then also, this was followed by misinformation about undocumented migrants. So when this happened, I really thought about what would Cindy do? And Cindy would keep on fighting for the people that are some of the most marginalized and stigmatized populations. So I really hold that in close to my heart about the work that Cindy has done. And I would not be here today as an academic or engaged in policy work if it was not because of Cindy. And she has had such a tremendous impact and opened so many doors for so many people. So thank you for this opportunity, and look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Veronica Padilla-Campos, who is the executive director of Pacoima Beautiful. Veronica is a native of the Northeast San Fernando Valley. She's a mom of 2 girls and a stepmom to 2 special needs boys. She has a bachelor's degree from UCLA in geography and environmental studies, and a master's in urban planning from UCLA as well. She is the executive director of Pacoima Beautiful, and that allows her to serve the community that she grew up in. She also served as a City of Los Angeles Planning Commissioner for 5 years and now serves as an SQUAMID Governing Board member. Thank you.
Hello, Feliz Dia de los Muertos. Very nice to be with all of you. It's nice to see friends. My name is Veronica Padilla-Campos. I'm the Executive Director of Pacoima Beautiful. Been there about, maybe now 14 years, 11 of those as the Executive Director. It's a real privilege to be working and serving the community that you grew up in. And when I started, we were 8 individuals, and now we are 38 individuals serving the Northeast Valley, and we've been able to create a planning arm, a policy arm, a comms arm. So really proud of what we've become, but also really proud of the history. We started with 5 moms that were part of a beautification committee in the 1990s. They were part of a larger initiative that eventually ended. And the moms were like, this can't go away. How do we keep Pacoima beautiful? So then they worked together and created a nonprofit. And so we heard a little bit of the issues in the Northeast, right? We have landfills, we have a rail yard, we have freeways, warehouses, trucks, any sort of nasty industry you can think of, it's probably in the Northeast Valley. So there's a lot of work to do. But it's a really great community because everybody really wants to work hard for the future of their kids, and they really want to be involved. And I have to say that since I became a mom, sort of this struggle has become even more real for me, and I get more angry when I see the injustices, right? Because I worry about the legacy that we're leaving behind for our kids. And so part of the work that we do is to identify ways to improve our community. And one year, our youth were asked to look at opportunities for open space, because we're also a community that lacks a lot of open space. And they identified the Pacoima Wash. And the Pacoima Wash is a tributary of the LA River. It starts in the Angeles Forest, flows through Silmar, through the city of San Fernando, through Pacoima, and then eventually meets up with the LA River. And so the kids identified the wash as a potential place to create a park. And so we did a vision, we worked hard to create a vision plan where we talked to hundreds of people to see what they can imagine of what the wash could be. And many times we couldn't translate wash in Spanish. I think on the internet it said lavado, like we can't say lavado. So we had some translation issues, but eventually we got community to come out, walk the wash, and see the potential, because you can see the mountains really beautifully, and so we developed this vision plan with their help. And it sort of sat vacant after we launched it in 2010. It sort of just stayed in the shelves. But stars aligned, and now we have some funding, and we're in the process of creating a feasibility study so we can better understand how we actually put some shovels in the ground and develop this greenway that our community has envisioned and has been waiting for so long. And that's sort of how I knew Cindy, through her work on the Pacoima Wash, but through the city of San Fernando. They're a lot more advanced than we are at the city, because they launched their vision plan before us. They actually have their park, which is the one we saw earlier, the Cindy Montañez Park, and they just had their groundbreaking for their greenway last week on Friday, I believe. So that's how I learned a lot about Cindy, because she was really instrumental in the city of San Fernando in making that happen. But, as an EJ organization executive director, being a woman, it's really rare. A lot of white older men lead these environmental organizations. So it's really great that when Cindy took over Tree People, because I feel like she really put Tree People on the map in a different way, in a special way. She really thought of planting trees, not just an extractive sort of way, right, where you ask people to do all this work and it's sort of a one-time feel good and then we walk away. She sort of thought of trees as let's go plant trees where people need them, where people asked us to plant them. And let's do it because it bridges environment and environmental justice dynamic together. And so I really admired Cindy for doing that, because she also thought of tree people and hiring locally, right? To make sure that she also empowered folks in the communities where these trees were planted. So I recently learned more about her leadership style, and I have to say I was left very inspired, because she also understood that planting a tree is just not planting a tree, but also to think of it as multi-benefit. So, her expertise in water, too. She was able to correlate trees and open space and health and, beauty of the community. And I love that. I love that she brought that and brought her expertise in policy. And sort of Barbara Romero brought this up when we were talking about today, is that she knew the inside-outside game, sort of like the politics and the community, and really was able to get things done because of that. So I haven't been paying attention to my time. I don't even know where I'm at. It feels like it's been a while, but yeah, I just want to leave off by saying thank you for inviting me, because it gave me the opportunity to look further into Cindy's life and her leadership, and I just regret that I didn't know her better while alive, but definitely through talking to folks that have worked with her and being here today. And today has been a super emotional day. I don't know if it's because it's Dia de los Muertos, but also just came back from a meeting at AQMD, and people were talking to us about how they were setting altars. People were setting altars for grandmas that they had never met, because their grandmas were dying so early because of the air quality issues in their communities. And just hearing all that is just so impactful, because as an AQMD member, that is our responsibility. And to hear that from folks, I take that really, really to heart. And we had a rule to pass, a rule that would really help support these community members, and we didn't pass it. I tried to make an opposing motion, and it got shut down, and it was very frustrating. And so there's a lot of work to still do. There's, from all you young leaders here, to think about taking space in these leadership roles and really being the best advocates that you can be, like Cindy has been for so many people. So I don't know if I made sense, but thank you for listening, and thank you for being here. Oh, 2 minutes. All right, I'm kind of on. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veronica, for those emotional remarks, and just reminding us of the resilience that it takes to do this type of environmental justice work. I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Dr. Isabella Arzeno-Soltero. Isabella is an assistant professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering here at UCLA, and the principal investigator of the Coastal Community Resilience Lab. Her research focuses on how communities and ecosystems adapt to, recover from, or resolve environmental stressors. Dr. Arzeno-Soltero cultivates close collaborations with local communities as well as with scholars from diverse disciplines. So, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. So unlike my two previous colleagues here, I didn't actually know Cindy Montañez myself, but I've learned a lot about her. She was and continues to be an inspiration. As was mentioned earlier, she had this way of bridging the gap between people in power and the communities that get affected by those decisions. So in her case, between politicians and communities. And I see a lot of parallels with me being a person in science. In science, you also see this big divide between the people, and in engineering, between the people doing the studies, making technologies, and then the communities that get harmed by these. And I'm not, perfect. I haven't really quite achieved a perfect flattening of hierarchies in my own work, but in my lab, we try to follow a few core principles that I think mesh with Cindy's legacy. So the first thing that we do is that we work with communities. We don't work on communities. We don't extract from communities. We share with them. We give them something, they give us something, we work together. And last but not least, we don't expect to be leading the way in the work. We provide skills if they're needed, and then the communities make their own change. And so we're specifically really, I'm a young professor. I just started last year, and this is my second year. But my did not expect that, nor do I know why I received that, but thank you. I actually started working with the community in Coachella Alianza back in 2020. And I did that because they invited me, as somebody that studies water, which is what I do, they invited me to help build a community science program to monitor the water quality of the Salton Sea. And for those of you who might not be familiar, the Salton Sea is not that far from here. It's about a 3-hour drive to the southeast, and it's California's largest lake. The communities that live around the Salton Sea are mostly indigenous and Latinx. A lot of them are low-income communities, and public health is a huge issue there. The rate of childhood asthma, for example, is 3 times the national average. So there's a lot of health problems. And the reason why I was asked to come help build a program measuring the water quality at the Salton Sea is because they understand that the health of the environment impacts the health of the people. Now, the area around the Salton Sea it's very agriculturally productive, but also has a lot of water issues. So when water comes into the Salton Sea, it's full of all these nutrients that come from pesticides and fertilizers. And what that does is that it makes the Salton Sea one of the bodies of water with the most nutrients in the US. And in the end, what that does is help things grow in the Salton Sea like algae. And when that gets decomposed, you get this really bad smell. So this rotten egg smell. Actually, recently we had a red tide in Santa Monica. You probably smelled that smell too. And so this is hydrogen sulfide. Now, communities there have been living with this for decades. Decades. And currently, there's a few monitors around the Salton Sea that measure hydrogen sulfide, but the reason that is because in 2012, the smell got so bad that it reached wealthier communities in the West. And so they were like, okay, I guess, wealthy communities complain, we're going to add some sensors. And since then, what these communities have noticed is that what they breathe is actually way past any healthy standard, way past the California standard for hydrogen sulfide, and California standard is even past the international standard for hydrogen sulfide. And this affects their lives all the time. They have headaches and nausea. They sometimes feel trapped inside their homes because why would they go outside in those situations? And so here's where community power really comes in. We organized this water quality monitoring program, and members of the communities learned how to drive the boat, launch a boat into the Salton Sea, take measurements, analyze measurements, present data. They are using that data to write public policy briefs, comment in public policy meetings, and actually 3 of those people that were in that community science program are now pursuing PhDs, 2 of them with me here in the lab. And the reason, okay, I really don't, The reason I think it's important to say that is because they're the ones that are pushing forward the science. And as Cindy knew, like, the people in the community should be the ones pushing forward their vision. And that's why they are here now in the PhD program studying the Salton Sea. And recently, we actually had a few community workshops around the sea because we try to build our research idea with the community members. And the look of pride that people there had when they see one of their own presenting science to them and like talking with them about science is incredible. And it also really highlights something that I think is really lacking in science, which is this aspect of community knowledge. So in a lot of science and engineering, outsiders come in and they put down instruments or whatever, and they come to conclusions. But it turns out that that misses a big part of the story. So people like my students, they know from living there that there are things that you cannot measure. For example, one thing we found out that was really important was that across all of the community workshops that we had consistently, people complain about the smell, but they also complain that this smell is horrible, terrible when it's humid outside. And it's this interaction between two different scientific variables that you wouldn't really understand unless you lived there. So these measurements that the South Coast AQMD is taking, the air quality monitoring district is taking, for example, doesn't take into account humidity and how bad, how suffocating that is for communities. So the instrument might say it's okay, but communities say it's not okay. And that's where that local knowledge really comes in. And so basically, this is a panel, right, about carrying forward Cindy's legacy. And I think a really important part of that is being able to work with communities and try to, like I said at the beginning, bridge that gap. Try to make sure that academia, in my case, politics in her case, are not just ignoring the people that know about the problem the most, which is the people that have to live with it. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to all of you, and I wanted to kind of open up the floor to our speakers to just maybe spend a minute or two if you have any final remarks about what you've heard or about Cindy or her legacy that you'd like to share, and we'll go first with you, Mike.
Well, again, thank you to Veronica and the Chicano Studies Research Center for this opportunity. I think Cindy would be so proud and so honored to have her legacy remembered here. And I think this panel really embodies everything that Cindy fought for. It's community, it's ensuring that everyone had a voice and it was able to make a change. And from the work on looking at the Coachella Valley to Pacoima Beautiful to Tree People, Cindy worked strongly on all those different aspects and to see the next generation thrive. And I think that would make her most happy is having young Latino people and people of color being able to be in these leadership roles, both as a policymaker and also a scientist.
Next. Just again, thank you for having me. Thank you to the work that you all do. Very much inspired to hear what you all do as well. And you know, I'm leaving today with Cindy más presente, more present in my mind, and the work that I do in my leadership role, whether it's at home with my girls at AQMD or at Pacoima Beautiful, and just really want to honor her in her legacy by making sure that people are heard and making sure that that's priority. So, thank you.
I actually didn't know this was on, so I don't know. I guess I want to end by saying that I think a lot of people are honoring Cindy's legacy in ways that we don't even realize. So Cindy, this event is called Latina Futures in the Environment. And honestly, like for example, in these communities, when you go, you talk to people, they're mostly concerned about future generations. And Cindy herself, when she was an undergrad here at UCLA, going on that hunger strike, was like, okay, she was the future, right? The students here are fighting for change, right? They're speaking out against the genocide in Palestine. The communities are fighting for change. The young generation is really, really leading the way. And I think in all different aspects, not just in the environment, people are honoring Cindy by doing that. Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers and for sharing, and all of you for being here. What we're going to do now is let you know that the formal program is over, and you're free to sort of go on to the next things. But we also wanted to provide an opportunity to have, for those of you who want to stay behind and share any sort of memories or reflections about Cindy, or any comments about her legacy, or any questions for our panelists. We'll be here to engage with that conversation for those of you who want to join us. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and we'll continue perhaps more informally for those of you who want to stick with us. Thank you.
And before people leave the room, I want to give a plug for Veronica Herrera's new book. She just published a book called Slow Harms and Citizen Action, Environmental Degradation in Latin American Cities. So we're excited about your book, and it aligns with all of this work. We have a reception outside. There's food and drink. But as Veronica Herrera said, you're all welcome to stay here and share your thoughts and memories of Cindy, or if you'd like, ask the panelists some questions. So thank you.
We can share the mic if anyone's interested. Any questions or thoughts?
Can you hear me now? Oh my goodness. Okay, I need one of these in my classroom. My name is Ruth Loavanos. I've been friends with Cindy. I was friends with Cindy for 42 years. Her parents are my little sister's godparents, and so our families have been close since they immigrated here from Mexico many, many years ago. So I was here with Cindy when she was on hunger strike. We went to middle school and high school together. In our political careers, we supported each other. And I want to tell you all to continue the fight. I have been fighting for the cleanup of Santa Susana Field Lab, which is the reason that I had cancer. Cindy and I both went through cancer together. I had cancer, and luckily I survived. Cindy did not. But she was always fighting the good fight, no matter where she was. And she was always encouraging me to fight the good fight. And now we see her nieces and my daughter, my children, who are fighting that good fight right now, looking for those kinds of opportunities. I was really interested in asking you a question, Ms. Arzeno-Soltero. I have a daughter who is in civil engineering, a son who is a mechanical engineering major at Northeastern, Northwestern, respectively. My daughter is just a few miles down the road at the SHIP conference in Anaheim, the Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers, and desperately seeking opportunities to do the kind of environmental justice work that you're doing, that she would like to do. But unfortunately, she's being pushed out in those spaces by Latino engineers. So when we applaud you, there's a reason we're applauding you. As a Latina, as a professor, as a Latina engineer who is training other civil and environmental engineers and inspiring Latinas to go into those fields, like my daughter, that's why we applaud you. And you take your flowers. So I just wanted to tell you that you are paving the road in the way that Cindy paved the road, and the way that I paved the road as the first Latina elected to Simi Valley City Council. We are building those bridges for the next generation, for our daughters and their children. And right now, more than ever, we need fighters like all of you to be publishing all the things and talking about what our disenfranchised communities are living with every single day. As a sixth grade teacher, I have asthma, my kids have asthma. We continue to live in schools and communities where we have pollution. I teach in North Hollywood. We have, oh my goodness, air quality issues. We have pollution issues. We have all those things. We're fighting right now to get measures passed so that we can get lead out of our water in our public schools. So I encourage you to vote for that measure. Please, everyone, vote. If you haven't already, please go vote on Tuesday. Our community colleges and our schools are in desperate need. I would love to work in a school after 25 years that does not have leaded pipes, where my students don't have to drink leaded water. So thank you for all the work that all of you are doing.
Hi, my name is Cully Nordby. I'm the Associate Director for the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, which is one of the co-sponsors for this event. And Cindy served on our Board of External Advisors, and I was lucky to know her. And I would say that she has, everything you've been talking about, she has definitely brought to the IUES in a really significant way. And I'll just keep it brief and just say that we have an environmental science practicum that all of our seniors take their senior year, and we are always looking for real-world environmental problems for our students to tackle. We work with community partners in organizations, nonprofits, public agencies, and actually, 2016 we worked with Pacoima Beautiful, was one of our clients that year. So, if you have a problem that you would like some really amazing, talented, enthusiastic environmental science seniors to tackle, we're really, really wanting to center environmental justice work that we do in that program. And so, please contact me, or just it's the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability Environmental Science Senior Practicum, and we would just welcome partnering with any and all of you on those projects.
I have a question for some of the panelists, whoever would like to answer. But I am one of Veronica Herrera's students. She's a great professor, obviously. I study urban planning, and I think what's become very apparent to me, and is probably apparent to most of you, is that most of the projects and interests centered by urban planners and politicians and environmentalists are not actually helpful to local communities, and do not really have local communities in mind, but center political interests and capital interests, et cetera. And even if they do center local communities, I think in keeping with the theme of today's event, they center more masculine perspectives that have been centered in academia and in professional fields for hundreds of years. So I guess what I'm curious to hear from any of you that would like to answer is, what avenues have you seen in your professional or academic or political or activist work to sort of try and recenter those communities, even against all of the prevailing forces of politics and academia and everything?
Easy question.
Hello. I have a lot to say about that topic, which I will not elaborate on here. But I can say that I've had to actually make a lot of difficult decisions, probably decisions that I've had to choose community over my career. I've had to say no to certain invitations, proposals that are not aligned with community. I've had to take my name off of papers from people that have insulted our community. It's not my community. I'm from Puerto Rico, not from the Coachella Valley. But I have had, and my partner is here, and she knows because I often consult her about this, but I've had to make a lot of very difficult decisions to make sure that I am not following, conforming, and just prioritizing my success over the community's.
I would echo that. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of support from your family, from your local community to take the road that Cindy did. There are consequences of being a community engaged scholar, engaging with the political sphere, but at the same time, if not us, who? And it really, I take that to heart, and just as I showed, like in my own research, I had pivoted away from sort of traditionally accepted topics in the environmental policy field and gone to some of the most marginalized, stigmatized populations like undocumented migrants that are Latino and indigenous, and how they're being impacted by climate-induced disasters as well as LGBTQ, as I mentioned before. And those are two controversial topics. And I went into those kind of working with farm workers, working with LGBT groups, with a really open mind and aware of what could be the consequences, but understanding that this was not being studied, this was not being put forward in terms of engaging policymakers of how do we center and provide protection to some of the most socially vulnerable populations. And because of those risks, I've been able to engage the governor's office here in California to kind of change how we look at disaster preparedness throughout the state, and ensuring that, working with community groups, that we're able to provide those disaster preparedness resources and disaster aid to populations that have been rendered invisible, not because of accident or choice, but intentional policies that have upheld traditionally these assistance from these communities. And then working at the federal level as well with FEMA and a couple other organizations such as NOAA and the U.S. Geological Society that's interested in going away from these abstract issues of how a general population is being impacted to a more fine neighborhood analysis population. But again, as Isabella mentioned, there are risks, and I have seen situations where you're not welcomed or you're not provided with grants or other types of allocates because you're pursuing these type of issues you're seen as being too radical or too activist.
I have a board of directors. They're my boss, technically, but I like to tell them that they're not my boss. The community is my boss, and that's who I answer to. And so we make sure that every project that we do, we have vetted through the community. If they do not want us to engage, we will not engage. They tell us what they need. And so there's been times where we do things that piss off, that upset the council members or the mayor or somebody, and we'll get that call. And I used to get nervous about it. Like, oh no, they're mad at me, and what is this gonna mean? Are they gonna take our funding? Now I don't get upset. Now I think, you know what? They need to be more scared of us because we have the people power. Like, they need to be okay with us. And so now, when they're upset, I kind of see it as a good thing. That means we're doing something right. And it opens up a dialogue, and we're able to, work together on things. So that's the way I've been able to learn to work within the system, because just like the story I told about AQMD today, it's so frustrating because there's so many politicians on that board. I think me and maybe one other person who's not an elected official, like they have pressure that I don't. So I am able to speak up more freely than maybe they can, but I just wish they would just have more, I don't know, heart or just more, I don't want to say the word. You guys know what I mean. you know what I mean. Yes, courage to get things done. So, hope we answer your question.
Grit.
Thank you.
Let's say grit.
I'm the father of Cindy Montañez, and I appreciate every single person that supports Cindy, helps Cindy, because she always tried to do the best she can do it for the community, for environmental, for all around. So she worked real hard since little. She started working in the Santa Rosa, teaching catechism at the age of 8 years old. She worked for Richard Alarcón, planting trees in all San Fernando Road. She do a lot of work because she loved to do it. So I appreciate every single person that helps Cindy. Okay, and sorry about that because I can't keep talking. Thank you. I really appreciate everybody.
I can't follow that, but thank you for her and for everything that she did and your support of her. I wanted to follow on something that you guys have been talking about, not being afraid to stand up to well, let's just call it like it is, all the old white men who run everything. What would you say to younger students or just earlier people who are in their earlier careers or even career switching into climate action? What would you say to them about standing up and, for their own integrity and having to make those tough choices when it comes to, I've just got to pay my bills this month and I need to take this, I need to take that. What would you say to them to encourage them to continue standing up to existing power structures and not being afraid to have people mad at you or wondering if this will harm your career in the long run?
Okay. Well, I didn't think this day would be so emotional for me, but I'm happy to be here. I would say to them that those people in power want you to stay silent. They want to intimidate you. They want you to be afraid, to not have an inquisitive mind, not to ask questions, not to raise your hand, not to demand for an alternative future, because we're told that we should accept the status quo or eat the slop that they give us. Everything I known from Cindy, I remember one story. I think it was my first week working in the legislature with her, and we were walking outside the Capitol, and there was a very important bill that needed votes, and a white woman, state senator, came up to her. She was the author of the bill, and says, "Well, are you going to vote for it?" And they're having this back and forth. And the senator says, "Well, I donated to your campaign." And then Cindy says, "Well, I'll write you a check and give you back the money." I literally think that was my second day or first day. So that's who Cindy was, not afraid to be that bull in the china shop. So I take that to heart and continue to do what I do, even though I know there could be consequences. But the long run is being able to have that difference and fight for those that are not represented by huge campaign donations.
I want to also speak to that by saying I also think that I'm thinking a little bit about what I've heard about Cindy, but also just thinking about what I know about advocacy work and being effective change makers, which is that if you are being effective, you're not alone. And the kind of work Cindy did and other effective advocates is really alliance building. So you're looking for your allies within the state and in the community. And my understanding is that she did put, unexpected coalitions together and did that work of some bridge building as well. And I think that that's an important aspect of change making. So yes, it is a struggle and the struggle is real, but also there are allies and there's people who can be converted to allies, and there's coalition building and a lot of behind the scenes coalition building and that's what environmental justice advocacy is all about. It's this like network building, that involves compromise sometimes and working with people that maybe might surprise you and doing that kind of work and being open to difference also. And you really would be surprised sometimes by the people you think are going to be such ardent, sort of almost like opponents, can also be part of coming into the coalition. And so that's just more a reflection of what I've seen sort of studying this stuff and what I've heard about Cindy being effective in passing the measures, having the measures passed, working with city council, So I think that's an important thing to be reminded of as well for young advocates and activists and people who want to be part of this type of work.
I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Cindy's family for being here and assisting us with this program. And I want to thank our panelists. We're now going to go to the reception area, enjoy some food, some performances. And after that, we're going to reconvene for some performances and further presentations. Thank you.